I just say that welcome to the headquarters of International IDEA. I'm very glad to have the opportunity to welcoming you in our headquarters. International IDEA is the Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance. It is, as you know, an intergovernmental organization with 35 member states and 2 observer states. My name is Massimo Tommasoli. I'm Director of Global Programs, which is one part of the work of International IDEA, the part that deals mainly with the generation and production of knowledge. But we also work on providing advisory services, especially to our regional programs. We have programs in all the regions of the world. And frankly, more recently, the knowledge generation has also come from the regions. So really, this is a more integrated institute over time. We also aim at influencing policy agendas. So we have also activities in the main policy, multilateral policy fora, including at the United Nations. The work that we are carrying out in global programs, but I would say more generally at IDEA on climate change and democracy, is relatively a recent new work stream. It has been adopted by the Council of Member States of IDEA about 2 years ago. We are now in the second year of implementation of this program, and climate change has been identified by the Council as a key issue for democracy because it poses sort of an existential challenge for democratic governance, and reconciling the sometimes short, even very short time frame for the action of political actors and the long-term impact of climate change and the need for hard choices to be taken in that perspective is a major challenge for all political systems in the world. So we are trying to influence agendas in that perspective. We want, in particular, through the climate change and democracy work stream, we want to renew and innovate democratic processes and institutions. And we want to help democracies to deliver inclusive and effective climate action for people today and for future generations. Today's lecture is the third event in the series. We call the series Stockholm Series of Public Lectures on Climate Change and Democracy. It is a cooperation between Stockholm-based institutions that have a shared interest in climate change and democracy from different perspectives. The first lecture in the series was delivered in April this year by Jenny King on information integrity, climate action and democracy. The second one was held in June by Nicole Curato on using public deliberation and citizens' assemblies to accelerate climate action. Today we will have the third one, as I said, and then the fourth and final lecture of 2024 is planned for the 5th of December. And Luisa Neubayer from Fridays for Future will speak about the importance of climate activism from a democracy perspective. So, first of all, I have to thank all the partners of the Stockholm series. These are many. We have the Konrad Adenauer Stiftungs Nordics office, the Stockholm Environment Institute, Future Earth, the Stockholm Resilience Center, LSU, the National Council of Swedish Children and Youth Organizations, and We Don't Have Time. These are not simply co-organizers of this event, they are truly partners because they engage a broader audience on climate change and democracy, and this creates linkages and interconnections between policy communities and activists who operate sometimes in very separate ecosystems. And then this partnership also allows for mutual learning and sharing of experiences between those communities. And these not only in Stockholm, but in perspective also regionally and globally. Now, the way the lectures are held is pretty much the same. We have an expert presentation for about 40 to 45 minutes, and then there will be a moderated discussion, will be moderated by my colleague and head of the program on climate change and democracy, Matthias Jäger, with an invited discussant, who he will also introduce. And then we'll have an open Q&A conversation with the audience in the room, and then we are all, at least those in this room, all invited to enjoy a reception at the end of the lecture. So this is just so that you know, a live streamed lecture, as well as the discussion will also be live streamed. And the lecture will be recorded and shared after the event as a video and in writing. Now, before introducing our speaker of today, I would like to say a couple of things that are really on the substance of what we are going to address today. And this is also because I'm personally very interested in the issue of participatory democracy. I've been working on participatory development in my previous career when I worked more on development issues, and there are many concepts that are actually drawn from that body of work. So I want to highlight three challenges, and you will see that both in the presentation and I'm sure also in the Q&A and the discussion, the panel discussion will emerge. And I would say, first of all, that representative democracy has been the core of the work of IDEA for many years. We are now in the 30th anniversary. Next year, we are going to celebrate 30 years of work and life, and we focused a lot on representative democracy. But participatory democracy focuses on some elements that actually integrate the elements that are sometimes missed out by the institutions of representative democracy. So participatory democracy and, for example, participatory budgeting, which is addressed in the lecture, is not a new concept. It was generated, interestingly, in a country from the global south, from Brazil, Porto Alegre in 1989. So we are really decades into the usage and declination in different ways of these concepts. This is very interesting, and let me get to the 3 points I want to make. First, as you can imagine, there is a challenge in reconciling the representative democratic institutions and the participatory democratic institutions. And these are challenges related to different levels of action to some extent. Representative democracy operates also at the national level, while participatory democracy has been generated more at the local level, and it influenced maybe sub-national levels, but only more recently engaged with the national level policy making. Then the second element of this aspect is that there are also, and you will see that in the presentation, interlinkages and interconnections between traditional political institutions and institutions of local governance. And these present great opportunities, as it will be highlighted, but it is not an easy endeavor, and there are also challenges there. So this is my first point. The second point is that a lot of this work over the decades has generated a body of techniques, expertise in participatory democracy has gained a lot of traction, and this generated a professionalization of the field. Now, this professionalization by some critiques, especially by sociologists and anthropologists looking at the work of participatory democracy, has been criticized in the name of politicization or depoliticization. There is a certain tendency to focus on the techniques, a technocratic approach to deliberative processes, which actually misses the importance of the political dimensions of what is being done. So striking a balance between these two aspects, good capacity to mobilize deliberative processes, manage them and bring them to fruition, and their political dimensions is a challenge. And the last point is probably also linked to the nature of our institution. IDEA is a global intergovernmental organization. We have member states from the global north and member states from the global south. Now, the third challenge is that as other aspects of democracy assistance, there has been a growing criticism about the need to decolonize these practices, because they are linked to a large extent to a flow of resources that originates in the global north and reaches the global south. Whereas, as I told at the beginning, the very innovations came from the global south, from the other way around. So the decolonization of this knowledge is a very important issue, and I'm pretty confident that today's presentation and the discussion will help us to shed more light on these. Now, a couple of words of introduction on today's lecture. It will be delivered by Greta Rios, and the title is The Promise of Participation: How Collective Decision-Making Can Get Us to More Effective Climate Policies. Now, Greta Rios is the co-executive director of People Powered. Greta is based in Mexico City and leads People Powered's work to grow the collective power of organizations and advocates supporting participatory democracy. Greta previously served as founder and executive director of Olin, right? A Mexican NGO that focused on the inclusion of youth in the governance of Mexico, and then took on a broader mission of working toward a country with strong institutions, citizens, and democracy. So we are very grateful to you, Greta, for joining us today and zooming in on a priority topic for IDEA, for the program that I lead, and our climate change and democracy work stream. Given the COP29 Baku that started yesterday, we cannot think of a more topical subject to discuss how innovative forms of democratic participation and decision-making can strengthen climate policy and action and ensure that both are conceived by and benefit all citizens. So, Greta, welcome, Greta, with a round of applause. Greta, the podium is yours.
Thank you. So first I want to say thanks again to International IDEA for this invitation. It's a very big honor to be here. And as you know, my name is Greta, and I am the co-executive director at People Powered, which is a global hub for participatory democracy. Today, I am standing before you with not one, but 3 different stories to tell you about how people around the world are using participatory democracy to solve problems big and small in creative and effective ways, along with their governments and their communities. In particular, I am going to talk about how communities out there are organizing themselves to face climate change and become more resilient. But first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Today, I am standing in front of all of you because more or less a decade ago, I fell in love with an idea that I came across on a subway train in my commute to work in Mexico City. The idea was very simple. The city was going to let citizens have a say in deciding how to spend a part of the public budget by allowing them to present project proposals and vote for them for their implementation. It must have been around 2013 or so when I learned about the voting stations for neighborhood projects that would be set up in that same station the following Sunday. I had just returned to Mexico City after spending some time abroad, and I had no clue what these neighborhood projects were. But at that time, I was into the 3rd year of being the founder and executive director at Olin, a Mexican NGO that works around democracy and the rule of law. One of Olin's areas of interest at that time was youth inclusion in democracy and social change. So the idea of the neighborhood projects was really appealing to me. Later on that evening, I spent some time learning about the neighborhood projects and how participatory budgeting, which was the technical name for them, worked. I did not know it back then, but that poster in the subway changed my life for the good. Olin ended up becoming an expert organization on participatory budgeting. We created the first website to track down the progress made by the projects. We participated in creating a new legislative framework to make the process smoother. We evaluated other experiences of participatory budgeting in several cities in Mexico, and to this day, Olin is still working on spreading this idea around. Here comes the first story. Bear with me. But first, I need to give you a little bit more context on why my team at Olin at the time and I thought that it was worth the shot dedicating a lot of time, a lot of energy, and a lot of love to pursue the expansion and improvement of participatory budgeting. Mexicans, as many other citizens around the world, have fallen out of love with democracy. Not only did they have to struggle for decades to get some sort of democracy going on, but the shiny new system actually failed to deliver on most of the things it had promised. It is not a surprise that most Mexicans feel no excitement about going to the voting stations or getting involved in political affairs. But participatory budgeting offers new insights into democracy on at least 3 different fronts. The first one has to do with how long it takes you to actually see the results. Spoiler alert, it doesn't take long. From the moment you vote on your favorite proposal to the actual execution of the winning project, just a few months go by. In Mexico City, for example, citizens go to the voting stations in May, and projects must be concluded by the end of the same year. This makes it easy, or at least easier, to track the whole process from promises to execution. Thanks to Olin and other entities, it is now possible to track the projects that have been selected per neighborhood, as well as the costs associated with them and their completion status. This brings me to the second insight. Participatory budgeting is a great way to use democracy to teach people of all ages about fairly abstract and quite technical concepts, such as public procurement, public budgets, fiscal transparency, and accountability. It is really encouraging to be able to track the transformation that happens when citizens go from being amateur democracy enthusiasts to understanding the depths of how public projects should unfold from start to finish. And the fact that participatory budgeting teaches this through experience and, in a sense, gamification, makes it even stronger because it is always easier to learn something by doing it than just by sitting in a classroom and reading about a concept that is absolutely foreign to you. The third aspect I want to highlight is the most important. It has to do with the notion of agency that this sort of process transmits to the people who participate. It is truly transformative knowing deep inside you that you are able to change things in your neighborhood to make it better, and that the way to get there is by talking to your neighbors, by co-creating visions of your street together, by doing research on the legal status of that piece of land that has been abandoned for decades. In a nutshell, by making democracy work for you. I believe that people who have become involved in participatory budgeting also become more active in their communities. And now that they're more active, they even have the tools to do the change they want. They are known in their neighborhoods as leaders, they have direct contact with the local authorities, they understand some of the problems of their community, and they know at least of one mechanism that they can use to solve these problems. These 3 components, the visible and quick effects of the process, the pedagogical component, and the creation of agency among the population, are present not only in participatory budgeting, but are common effects of participatory democracy processes in general. You see, participatory budgeting is part of a broader family of innovative democracy practices around the world that have the ultimate goal of getting more people to participate in decision-making along with their governments on things that affect their lives. During this talk, I will talk about some of the mechanisms that are used in the field of participatory democracy, and in particular, about their effectiveness for tackling climate change. This is where the first story begins. Or maybe not. There it is. Sorry, I forgot I added effects to my presentation, but this is where the first story begins. In 2022, the All-In team worked in the state of Hidalgo in Mexico, and concretely in the community of Santana Tzacuala in the municipality of Acasochitlan. This is an indigenous community of 5,000 inhabitants where local customs and traditions reign and permeate the political structures as well as the citizens' understanding of their civic duties and belonging. Upon entering this very small town, it is evident that it is a tight community and that they hold their traditions really close to their hearts. Women in Santana wear traditional clothing, woven and embroidered locally. Santana's main economic activity is the trade of flowers that they buy from nearby producers and then they resell them. This means that many of the people who live in the community are not usually in the community during weekdays. This town is also known for its high emigration rate, especially among young males. The 5,000 inhabitants number is actually an estimate because it's really hard to keep track of the population under such conditions. In Santana, there is a traditional representative body that acts as the highest authority when it comes to taking decisions that have a direct impact in the community. This body is known as the delegation, and it is made up of 4 people who have strong bonds with the community, and they are elected to serve a full-time, 1-year term with no economic compensation involved. It is a great honor to serve on this body, and this job is taken with the utmost seriousness. The members of the delegation were the first brick wall I bumped into when my team and I were trying to convince them to take a leap of faith and engage in a project to expand democracy in Santana by running a pilot participatory budgeting project in the community. I want you to picture the following. It is the early afternoon of a very foggy day in Santana when Carla, a 24-year-old democracy enthusiast, and I arrived to have our first hearing with the delegation. We have absolutely no clue what to expect, how to address this group of older and very conservative men, and we're also the only 2 people in the room who are wearing face masks because there is a peak in COVID in town and we are both very afraid we might catch it. We then spent more than 3 hours going back and forth with the project's specifications, the reasons why we think it's a great idea, and how we will devote almost a full year to training and working with the community to design and run this pilot until the winning projects are fully delivered. It is very evident that both them and us are out of our comfort zones. The all-female team in All-In is more used to working with audiences that look and speak a bit more like us. And the all-male, all-middle-aged delegation members are also not used to speaking to women, least of all to young women who come unaccompanied to present projects at the town hall. We left Santana that day very late without a concrete reply on their part, and also with a lot of doubts on our hearts. The fact that it was super dark and rainy did nothing to help our mood. But apparently the saying is correct. After the storm comes the sun. Luckily for all, after a few days, we received a call from the delegation saying they approved of this collaboration. This was the beginning of a series of visits to Santana, during which we truly fell in love with this community and its people. The All-In team spent the following 6 months working with the Santaneros, this is how they refer to themselves, to set the rules of the process, but also to train relevant actors on how participatory budgeting works. They made sure that women had seats at the decision-making bodies, and they also pushed for children to be able to participate in the process. Both requests were granted, and some very easy actions were taken to make sure that these 2 groups were represented throughout the process. One of the actions consisted in bringing the training sessions on participatory budgeting to the schools, so children could learn about the process and start thinking about their options for voting. I absolutely love participatory budgeting sessions with children because they are so used to being left out that when you tell them they will be able to present proposals and vote in the process, their first reaction is always disbelief. But then their second reaction tends to be joy and empowerment and agency. This is exactly what we're looking for. The people of Santana decided that children from age 10 and upwards were eligible to participate in this process. The reason they decided on this had to do with the fact that in this community, when a child turns 10, they are required to start providing the community with services like mowing the grass or cleaning up common areas because they are already part of the community. The logic applied here was if that they were old enough to be accountable to perform these tasks, they should also have the right to fully participate in the democracy project. The All-In team spent many hours at the local middle school getting to know these children, talking to them about the problems of their community, and seeing them come up with creative solutions to these problems. At the end of the process, 2 of the 3 winning projects were proposed by children and youth. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I will tell you more about the winning projects in a bit. Getting the women involved was a bit harder, but it was not impossible. We just met them where they were, was the explanation the All-In team gave me when I asked them how they had managed to get the women to participate. They went to public parks, the church atrium, and the community gardens where women normally congregate to weave together while they talk to each other and take care of their children. The third winning project was proposed by a mother of 2 young kids. In her project proposal, she asked for a playground where the kids could play safely while the women could weave and look after them. But let's go back to the children and youth and introduce you all to Heidi, who is the living prototype of the citizen we want to empower and make sure that they stay engaged for life. Heidi is a 12-year-old indigenous girl who lives in Santana. She found out about the participatory budgeting pilot when the All-In team went to her school to invite her and her classmates to participate. Heidi had been concerned about the environment for some time now, and she saw this project as a great opportunity to do something about it. She had heard from her grandfather that many years ago there had been a dense forest in Santana, but that this forest had been burnt down in a wildfire and had not succeeded in regrowing on its own. With this in mind, she proposed a reforestation project where she and her classmates could help plant trees and take care of them so they could bring the forest back to Santana. It was a great victory for Heidi, but also for the community, because the project was designed in such a way that it increased the chances of the trees surviving. What Heidi's school did was that they adopted the trees and they watered and took care of them regularly. This is a great example of community action to mitigate climate change done by using participatory budgeting. Through this project, the school children learned about negotiation, project management, climate change, and civic engagement. They also learned that they could tackle the problems of their community in innovative ways and that the adults could follow their lead. In 2023, Heidi was awarded the State of Hidalgo Youth Award for her contributions to her community and as a recognition of her leadership skills. Some unintended but really welcomed consequences of this project were: the participatory budgeting voting process got more votes than the last official democratic exercise that the community had. It actually got more than twice the votes that this democratic exercise had. In 2024, there was a woman appointed as part of the delegation for the first time in history. Nearby communities have passed legislative acts that allow them to have participatory budgeting processes, and others have asked for technical assistance to replicate this process locally. All of these resonate with the results that People Powered has been getting through the Climate Democracy Accelerator, where we work with local organizations and governments to implement a participatory democracy process to tackle or mitigate climate change at the local level. But first, Let me tell you a little bit more about People Powered and how I ended up being part of this incredible organization. People Powered is a global hub for participatory democracy. We work to expand the power and impact of organizations and leaders around the world who are building a more participatory democracy. Through this work, we expand people's power to make decisions along with their governments. The way I explained this to my mom was, People Powered works so that the all-ins of the world can have bigger impacts and struggle less when creating new processes. This made much more sense to her. I applied for a position in People Powered at the end of 2022 because it made sense to me to grow professionally into doing some work at the international level and use the lessons I learned from creating and directing all-in to benefit more people. Now, let me tell you a word or two about participatory democracy before jumping to the second story I want to share with you. As I said before, participatory democracy aims at having more people involved in decision-making along with their governments about things that affect them directly. Whether this means adding a new set of swings to the local park or designing and implementing a new policy to regulate CO2 emissions, the key component here is the degree of participation that the local citizens have when making these decisions. Participatory budgeting is just one method to implement participatory democracy. Some others include citizens' assemblies, participatory planning, participatory policy making, and legislative theater. I am very well aware that Nicole Curato did a great job at her Stockholm Series talk when she talked to you about the role of citizens' assemblies and their value as a tool for designing climate change solutions. So I will focus on other participatory democracy tools that are just as powerful. So brace yourselves as I will now take you to Zimbabwe, particularly to the town of Chipinga in the rural district that bears the same name. People Powered got to know about Chipinga in the context of our Climate Democracy Accelerator. This program was initially launched in 2021 and has evolved through 4 cohorts of participants who are using participatory democracy practices to mitigate the effects of climate change at the local level around the world. Chipinga is a rural district in the Manicaland province of Zimbabwe. It has around 25,000 inhabitants. This location was chosen by Kusaishi Seti of the local NGO Green Institute to run a participatory policy-making process due to the vulnerability of its population vis-à-vis the effects of climate change. Kusaishi used this project to apply to our Climate Democracy Accelerator and got accepted. This is part of his story. In previous years, the town of Chipinga had experienced extreme weather phenomena. For example, they were extremely affected by the passage of Cyclone Idai in 2019, which meant that they experienced extreme floodings and heavy rain that lasted for days and left a trail of destruction on its path. While there are national provisions in Zimbabwe to tackle climate change, at the local level things look quite different, as these policies are not properly enforced and the ones that have to suffer all the effects of natural phenomena are the local communities. This is a common situation in many parts of the globe. National policy is normally created from the top and does not necessarily fit the needs or the capacity of local communities. This is one of the reasons People Powered created the Climate Democracy Accelerator, where we work hand in hand with duplets of local governments and civil society groups to develop and implement participatory democracy mechanisms to help people solve these problems locally with tailor-made processes that end up with locally actionable plans. The project that Kusaishi and the Green Institute decided to run as part of the People-Powered Climate Democracy Accelerator consisted of running a co-creation process among government workers, local authorities, and civil society members, including farmer groups, who deliberated on the challenges that Chipinga was facing and which could be addressed through the enactment of a Chipinga climate change policy. The technical term to describe this is participatory policy making, and the idea behind it is simple. It means that the government is open to dialogue and co-creation when it comes to designing policies to be later implemented in the community. In the case of Chipinga, the process was particularly insightful because one of the first things that participants pointed out was that while inhabitants were suffering from the direct consequences of climate change, a big number of them were not aware what climate change actually meant and how it could affect them in the future. According to the Green Institute, only 1 in 5 residents were aware of what climate change was and how it was a threat to this particular community. Just like participatory budgeting, one of the key components of participatory policy making, and to be honest, of all participatory democracy instruments, is its pedagogical element. People who participate and people who live in the vicinity of those who participate get to learn and forge informed opinions on subject matters that affect their lives in a contained, joyful, and respectful environment where the learning process is nurtured and encouraged. The best part is that they don't even realize how much they're learning because they learn while taking part in discussions with their peers. In the case of Chipinga, after the participatory policy-making process was complete, the community decided to create a brochure on climate change and its effects so everyone else could have access to this important information in the future. This pamphlet was published in Ndao and English. The way our Climate Democracy Accelerator works is that the People Power team, along with a group of highly qualified mentors from around the world, work with the civil society organizations and local governments and transfer capacity so that they can create an action plan to implement. The doublets are assigned a mentor who oversees the process and an implementation grant at the end of the training phase of the program. Kutsaishi Seti and Mateusz Wojciszak, Polish, from the Field of Dialogue Foundation in Poland, his mentor for this project, are still in touch and working together on new projects. But let's go back to Chipinga. An important element about the Chipinga process was that Kutsaishi made sure that the headmen, as traditional leaders are known in this community, took part during the discussions and how their participation was a key component when it came to implementing the policy within the communities. This is of particular importance because not only did it mean that the policies would be correctly implemented, but it also helped improve the relationship between the local community and the government into a more collaborative one. After the rounds of discussion took place in Chipinga, the local government ended up with a draft policy on climate change mitigation actions that they committed to enact into a policy as soon as it was politically possible, because elections were just about to take place, as well as action plans for each of the communities. These action plans include local projects such as gardens where citizens can grow produce for the community, terracing, reforestation, strengthening indigenous knowledge systems in agriculture, and nature-based solutions in forestry conservation. A year after the participatory process concluded in Chipinga, there are indicators that show that deforestation decreased, women's participation in climate change mitigation increased, and over 50,000 people have become literate on climate change and its effects. A really powerful consequence of this project was that nearby towns and communities approached the Green Institute and requested for similar processes to take place with the participation of their communities. So far, they have engaged in training counselors, traditional and religious leaders in 2 districts and are waiting for local funds to be released so they can replicate this project elsewhere, including other countries. For us at People Powered, these are the kind of results that we want to be able to report on. People self-organizing to get access to innovative forms of using participatory democracy to improve the living conditions on their own communities. People who are learning by example of nearby towns and their decision-making processes. And people who are not only able to cope with climate change challenges, but people who are even taking advantage of some of them by introducing new species of fruits and vegetables in their community gardens because the weather now favors them. They also enacted policies related to clean energy, crop, and irrigation changes to provide economic security and prevent erosion in Chipinga, ecosystem support, and lifting up traditional knowledge to do all the above. As you can see, this story also has the 3 magic elements. The realization by people that what was discussed in the process became a policy that was enforced successfully and shortly afterwards. the ludic component of using participatory democracy to create literacy about complex social concepts such as climate change, policymaking, and mitigation strategies, and the sense within the community that they are empowered to design their strategies when it comes to facing extreme problems such as the ones posed by climate change. In this story, we even find a reconciliation process between the local government and the community. Because trust was built between these two groups during the participatory policy-making process, they are more likely to work together in the future by using the channel for dialogue that this process helped create. The creation of empathy can be the game changer when it comes to finding ways of weaving better relationships between communities and their governments. This is often a byproduct of legislative theater processes, which is another one of the participatory democracy mechanisms that we use and promote at People Powered. I intentionally added a story that involves this process so I can get a chance to explain to you what it looks like in action, since this is the least well known of them. The idea behind legislative theater is, as I said, to create empathy among decision makers and community members so that better policies and governance decisions can be made together. Legislative theater consists of gathering a group of people and having them enact a situation where they have to find solutions to everyday problems that a certain community is going through, but intentionally having the different actors work together to place the scene into motion. As such, we could end with the local public servant enacting the citizens that are affected by their daily decisions, and on the contrary, we could have the citizens play the role of the public officials who have to enforce such decisions and report on the results to the public. In this manner, both sides in a situation get to see and feel what the others are feeling and thinking at the time of making decisions, and afterwards, they use that information to jointly create solutions or action items to solve the problem. The case study I want to bring to your attention is taking place in Uganda, and it is combining legislative theater and a technique called music, dance, and drama to establish a dialogue between civil servants and girls, boys, people with disabilities, and refugees around the topic of swamp degradation in the Masaja B village. This process is led by our partner, the Might Foundation, a participant in our fourth and newest cohort of the Climate Democracy Accelerator. Masaja B is a village in central Uganda, located around 8 kilometers south of Kampala. Even though it is located very close to the capital city, this area has become more and more vulnerable to flooding as a consequence of climate change, since it is located in a swampy area. When there are strong rains, the roads in the community become impassable, affecting the inhabitants greatly for days and even weeks at a time. The legislative theater process that the Might Foundation is currently designing aims to find joint solutions for this problem. The team at the Might Foundation will shortly begin working with their mentor to create the legislative theater experience. In the meantime, let us imagine what this will look like. Think for a second that we are Masaja citizens and authorities, and we have all been given roles to play, using music, dance, and drama during the legislative theater process. For example, one of us will be handed a slate of paper that will read, "You are the highest authority of the village of Masaja. You were elected democratically and you are very well liked in the community because of your deep understanding and swift solving of the problems of the people that Masaja are facing. Lately, however, you have been losing popularity because the roads that connect Masaja to Kampala have become flooded again and people are afraid they will lose their businesses. What is worse, there has been an outbreak of malaria due to the stagnated water, and even some crops have gone to waste. Even your own family is struggling as your children are not able to attend school and your spouse had to miss a medical appointment because of the flooding. You really want to put an end to these floods, but for God's sake, rain is something that you cannot control. There is only so much you can do about this. If things do not improve, you are beginning to fear the people will start rioting or moving elsewhere. Please prepare a 5-minute monologue using rap to communicate your current status to the audience." Yeah, this is what legislative theater looks like, and it's really fun to watch. I'm trying to recreate it as best as I can. Yet another one of us will get the following assignment. You are a 14-year-old young girl who lives in Massaja. You attend the local middle school and enjoy spending time with your friends. Your favorite subject in school is biology, and you plan to become a doctor in a few years. Lately, you have been missing school a lot because of the floods. When you miss school, you get a bit anxious. You have been working hard to get admitted to the best high school in Kampala as a first step to go to med school later on. You are thinking about moving with your auntie in Kampala permanently and transferring to another school there, but this will take a big economic toll on your family. If it comes to that, you are willing to do it. Nothing will get between you and your dreams. Please prepare a 5-minute dialogue between you and your mother explaining the reasons why you have decided to finally move to Kampala with your aunt. And yet a third role would read something like this. You are a scholar who has devoted your life to studying the impacts of climate change around the world. You have been hired by the authorities of Massaja to inform the community about climate change, its possible future impacts in the community, ways to increase the resilience of this particular settlement, and some case studies in nearby places where successful measures have been taken to tackle or mitigate climate change. Please prepare a short song that uses local rhythms to convey this message. After the setting scene, the participants will gather and conduct a debrief that will allow them to collect information and lessons learned on how everyone is experiencing the situation, the things they would like to change, and possible solutions from the different points of view. The outcomes of this legislative theater exercise will then be used to debate, propose, vote, and decide on policies to improve the situation of the swamps in the region. This might sound unbelievable to some of you, but legislative theater has helped many people say things they would not normally voice out loud for fear of repression, or worse, for lack of words to express them. In spaces where civic restrictions and fear are high, the use of ludic instruments such as legislative theater and music, dance, and drama help address those restrictions and bring about a more even ground for establishing dialogue among actors. In the case of the Massaja village, there will be 2 stages for this process. One of them will take place in person and the other one online. The in-person process has been specially designed to include people with disabilities as well as people who may not afford internet access to participate in the later stages of the process. After the in-person stage concludes, there will be a month-long process that will be held online, where people will receive training and participate in the discussion around the policies created by the in-person group. In this way, the team of the Might Foundation made sure that the whole process remains inclusive throughout the whole execution. As you can see, legislative theater shares the 3 main components I have been highlighting throughout the presentation. I would say this is the mechanisms that has the highest ranking when it comes to learning by playing. People seldom realize it, but when they are playing the role of whoever is on the other side, they get big insights on why the problem may be harder or more urgent to solve than they first thought, for example. The swiftness factor is also present here. The time it takes from the legislative theater process to the setting in motion of agreed upon measures to tackle a problem will always be shorter than waiting for the government to come up with a top-down solution that most of the times will not be tailor-made for the affected community. The third element is the power of agency that the process transfers to the people. It is those affected by the problem who are expressing their voices, putting the problem in words, and then helping find solutions to it. People who participate in these processes normally adopt the idea that they do not need to sit and wait for the authorities to solve their problems. They can contribute with their ideas, their inside knowledge, and their creativity to find solutions and improve their communities. Although the legislative theater process in Massaja has not happened yet, I wanted to bring this example forward as a case we could all follow closely to see what results the people in this community come up with. This is one of the 15 projects that will be taking place after their teams finish their training process in our Climate Democracy Accelerator and receive their implementation grants. Our strategy at People Powered is to help launch pilot programs that can then inspire broader waves of change. And this is happening. Nearby communities in both Santana and Chipinga have started similar processes to the ones I talked about today, and we are sure that as our programs expand, more and more communities will follow. The challenges that climate change is presenting governments and communities with are not easy to solve. Some of these challenges pose a direct threat on the ways of living of communities, on their traditions and beliefs, and even on the land that they are established on. However, at People Powered, we believe that one way to create more inclusive and sustainable solutions to these challenges is by making sure that every voice gets a chance to express their views and ideas on how to jointly prevent, face, and solve the crisis that climate change will bring about. We are using democracy to create and replicate these solutions around the world, and we are inviting others to join us in this adventure. Climate change is truly scary, but there are also great stories along the way. I want to end this talk with two pictures taken a few months ago in the community of Santana. This is how the trees look 1.5 years after they were planted. Hades forest is growing back, and hopefully it will not be the only one. Thank you very much.